Consumers and businesses alike are placing a more focus on sustainable practices and environmentally friendly products and services. The energy industry is no exception, with an emphasis on providing these and aiming to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all, which is according to achieving SDG 7. Countries around the world are committed to developing and deploying alternative forms of energy, and there's a phrase which is becoming more and more common: green energy. Today, we'll be discussing what green energy is all about and its ability to become Ghana's superpower. I am Charlotte Mensah, and welcome to Focus on Interact. Joining me in the studio today is George Kofi Owusu, the Green Boy. George is currently the program manager for the Green Energy Project at Abeyie Innovation Studios. He holds a master's degree in environmental management from the Pan African University and a bachelor's degree in environmental engineering from the University of Energy and Natural Resources. George has spanning clean energy, solid waste management and air quality, research, leadership, and development. Welcome, George, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to see you. How are you doing? Okay. We also have with us in the studio Ali Eliason. Ali is a policy analyst at the Africa Center for Energy Policy. His research interests include renewable energy, techno-economic analysis, life cycle assessment, and demand response strategies. He holds a master's degree in sustainable energy management and a bachelor's degree in renewable energy engineering, both from the University of Energy and Natural Resources, Ghana. Thank you for joining us, Ali.
Thank you, Charlotte. Nice to meet you, George.
Nice to meet you. Please, how are we doing? Please, I hope you are doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to be on this platform with George, who happens to be my colleague back in engineering school. Yeah, I look forward to interacting and learning.
It's a pleasure to have you. Now, with a new phrase going around, green energy, what is green energy all about, and what will happen if people don't buy into the idea of green energy? Ali, please, I'd like to take your opinion, your view on this first. What is green energy all about? And what will happen if people don't buy into the whole idea of green energy?
Okay. Thank you very much. I'd want to start with a little story, sort of. I'll try to be as brief as possible. Somewhere back in 2016, that was the time that I and some other colleagues were reading for the first time, I think, in the West African sub-region, a program called Renewable Energy Engineering. I remember quite well when we're given introductory letters to seek for internship, that kind of initiative where you would only be introduced and then use that as a capital to find your own way of getting an internship, which was a requirement for graduation. At the time, I walked into the Zoomlion headquarters at Ashaliboche, their research, innovation and development department, and introduced myself as such. They were like, okay, so what course did you read? And I mentioned renewable energy engineering. Like, is that electrical engineering? I was like, no. Mechanical? No. Is it petroleum? No. Like, okay, so what exactly is this? Yeah, I bring this to kind of give a little background on how far we have come in terms of the public awareness of this topic. And so probably I wouldn't have to explain too much. Today, I'm not sure I would have to explain myself to that extent to people in order to get an attachment anywhere. So before I talk about green energy, I would want to approach it from a first principle perspective, right? all the forms of energies that we have, the sources rather, can be traced to four key sources. First, you talk about, nuclear fusion reactions within the core of the sun. That comes as solar energy. Then you talk about decay of radioactive isotopes within the core of the Earth. That comes as geothermal energy. And then you talk about the planetary movements and their, interactions with other earthly bodies and the moon that forms the tidal energies. And then you can talk about fission reactions of radioactive isotopes on the surface of the Earth that comes as nuclear energy. Now, along throughout our civilization, I think solar energy is, of course, the most common, and it manifests in several forms. The most common that we have exploited so far is the form that kind of transforms or uses the sun's energy, to through photosynthesis, and then we have the biomass resources that the other animals depend on, and then their remains then form the fossil fuels that our civilization had been hinged on for this long. Now, our reliance on these energies have led to the emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases that enhances, the greenhouse effect, and the consequence of that is global warming. The consequence of that is climate change. And so these energies that have, with time, had dire impact on the climate is what we are rethinking, and then moving towards energies from sources that are environmentally safe, environmentally friendly, and also in terms of our immediate air, have less impact on the particulate matter in the air. So green energy, in short, I would say are energy from sources, right? And we can explore all the other three that have so far not had as much attention as the basic forms of solar energy that we have had in the form of fossil fuels. So environmentally friendly energy sources are green energy, and just gave that background to show us the several other alternatives that we have.
All right, thank you very much. Now, George, what will happen if people don't buy into the whole idea of this green energy that Ali has explained to us? But Ali, you use so many technical terms. If a layman is listening to this, they might find it a little hard to come to terms with decay of radioisotopes, how, because someone may not know what radioisotopes are and how they
Yeah,
even
sorry, calm
get
down.
decayed and how. All right, thank you. Yeah, so George, I want to ask, so if people don't buy into the whole idea of green energy, what do you think will happen?
Hello, Charlotte.
Yeah.
Hi, George. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, should I go with my submission?
Yes, please, you should.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ali, for the explanation. To buttress what you just said, as you rightly said, green energy is simply a form of energy that has less environmental impact, or that leaves less traces on the environment. Now, what will happen if people do not embrace green energy? Let me give you an example. We all walk by the roadside every day, okay? Or imagine if your mom is sells by the roadside. Now, the modern cars that we use and most of the machines that we use today use fossil fuel. Okay, and these fossil fuels, when they are burnt in engines, they release gases that are very dangerous to the environment and the health of people. So I asked you to imagine your mom maybe selling by the roadside, or you walking by the roadside every day, not covering your nose, because in as much as we walk around not covering our noses and not understanding that the fossil fuels that are being burnt and the atmospheric air that is around us is polluted. Okay, if we come to understand that, we know that walking around in these conditions is very dangerous. Now, the result of some of these burnt fuels is carbon monoxide. Okay, and carbon monoxide is able to bind with your hemoglobin, and it's 300 times stronger than the original hemoglobin, oxygen carrying hemoglobin that you have. And that is how dangerous it is when it comes to some of these conventional energy forms we use that we are advocating for green energy. Also, let us look at most of our mothers who sell or who cook foods. Most of the fuels that, if not in recent times, most of them used to use this firewood and all that. And biomass energy is another form of energy that releases a lot of these gases also. So when we talk about green energy and why we should embrace it, we do not talk only about environmental impact, but we also look at the health aspect. And that is where the interest should come in. Embracing green energy means that you're embracing an energy form that has less impact on the environment. The health issues that are related or associated with them are very less. And I believe that we would all want to have a good life. I mean, there's a research that tells us that about 18,000 deaths annually is attributed to air pollution that comes from cooking and then using some of these fuels. So why not we embrace a form of energy that is less that pollutes environmentally less, and then also is very health friendly to us. And I believe that is the reason why, for health wise, and then also for the safety of our environment. Now we're talking about sustainability. If we want to look into a future where we can be proud of what we have done today, and our generations who are coming after us can be able to dwell in it without suffering the consequences of what we are doing today, then it's time we start thinking green, so that we can have an environment that can echo into the future and also support future generations. And that is the reason why it is very important that we should embrace green energy.
Now, you mentioned about how the fossil fuels negatively affect the environment. And as it stands now, fossil fuel actually helps in powering so many things up in the world today. Now, if you say we should embrace green energy, do you think green energy can fully replace fossil fuels?
Um, Let me try and um, hi Charlotte. I don't know if you can hear me. All right.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. So let me just try and respond to that question and also buttress George's point made so far. You see, when you talk about adopting more sustainable sources of fuels, the immediate thought I think that comes to people's mind is what is the cost of the transition? What is the cost of adopting sustainable forms of energy? But then it's also important to ask, what is the cost of inaction? What is the cost of not adopting these sustainable sources of energy, right? I know probably the question is coming from the point of view of inclusion, ensuring that if you're adopting newer forms of energy, more sustainable forms of energy, how about the people whose lives have been built around existing forms of energy? What then happens to their livelihoods? But here's the case, right? The World Health Organization, in their 2020 list of top 10 leading causes of deaths, cites respiratory diseases resulting from household cooking fuels. This we cannot mention as inclusive. There's nothing inclusive about avoidable respiratory diseases resulting from household cooking fuels. There is nothing inclusive about diminishing low crop yields, right, as a result of increasingly unpredictable weather and rainfall patterns, right? In fact, Deloitte in their 2021 report mentions that the cost of climate inaction over the next 50 years would amount to at least $178 trillion, right? These are costs that would result from inaction. So what we should be looking at is a long-term sustainable pathway that is climate-proof, and also have the possibility of actually bringing about more prosperity as time goes on. So that is the angle I would want the conversation to also consider in the conversation about inclusion, because I believe that sustainable energy is inherently inclusive. Whilst, of course, we have to be mindful of the need to immediately cushion people whose livelihoods have been built around existing forms of energy. So yes, we have to transition, and we have to transition now, simply because the cost of transitioning would increase with every degree rise in temperatures, right? So the cost is lower today than it would be in the next 10 years, right? So yeah, this is just my take on this.
All right, thank you very much. George, my question was based on what you said. So I want to ask as you said, the cost of transitioning now is lower than it will be in the future. What's your assessment on the current green energy usage in the country, as in Ghana, as you are here right now?
Well, for Ghana, it is important for us to know that Ghana has been talking about renewable energy or green energy for a very long time. I mean, since if you could trace back, to since around even independence. Okay, because Ghana's first general form of energy was a hydropower dam. That is Akosombo Dam that still serves us today. All right, so there have been improvements. There have been many hydro dams and even mini ones that have been built. We can talk about Bui. Okay, and we can also talk about solar expansion even in the country. All right, but it is also important for us to know that majority of our energy, when it comes to the energy mix, comes from biomass and then fossil fuel. About, let me say, if not more than 70% will come from biomass and then fossil fuel. So Ghana is gradually getting there. There are policies that have been put in place. We've been talking about, as I said, for a very long time, but there is still more to be done. There is still more coverage to be done. Okay, if we don't take a closer look and a very strict measure now, it is going to get to a time, as Ali said, the cost is going to outweigh us and it's going to be very dire. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Okay. Now, with the country's population, which is constantly growing from time to time, and in a few years' time, it's going to be twice as good. Do you think that the whole country can be fully powered by green energy? So, as in getting rid of all other forms of energy to power, do you think the whole country can be fully powered, bearing in mind that with time or in a few years, the population which is constantly growing will be twice as it is right now? So, do you think the whole country can be fully powered by green energy?
I'll give my take, and then let my colleague add to the conversation. So, as George explored some possible pathways sustainable pathways that we can look at, I would want to add that in terms of decarbonizing, looking at energy options that have lesser impact on the environment, we have to be united behind the science. And why do I say this? Right? There are sectors within the economy that have higher opportunities for savings than some other aspects. Right? Now, when you look at the EPA report as well as reports from the World Bank, right, there is a twin relationship between the waste management sector and the energy sector. In fact, the energy sector contributed more carbon dioxide equivalents, right? The greenhouse gas emissions than the energy sector minus the industrial processing sector. Now, what that tells us is that there is a unique opportunity to decarbonize the waste sector, whilst at the same time providing electricity to offset the carbon negative, sectors within the energy sector. And you look at the waste composition of Ghana. I happen to have done a study on that, and you realize that luckily, or I'm not sure whether to call it fortunately or not, because more than 70% of our waste composition is organic, right? What this tells us is a low-hanging opportunity to explore waste to energy options that would, of course, ensure recovery of otherwise climate unfriendly emissions from landfills, whilst at the same time, offsetting the emissions from the energy sector. And one characteristic of waste is the fact that it grows with the population. As the population increases, of course, more waste would be produced. And technically speaking, you cannot do away with producing waste because it's not every part of a cassava that is edible. It is not necessarily, a correlation between food wastage and then the composition of organic waste within our waste composition. But then it's just the very technical inefficiency that waste will always be provided. And the higher the population grows, the more waste that will provide. So the waste sector is one area that I would think has a great opportunity for decarbonization at the same time meeting our energy needs. And in terms of solar, actually, we have vast, solar resources. I understand from the Energy Commission we have between 4 to 6 kilowatt hours per meter square of solar energy that is unharnessed. And you look towards the northern sector, there's opportunity for solar thermal. Of course, the cost implications do come in, but then that would open another conversation for what financing options do we have. But in terms of technical availability, we have more than enough renewable energy resources to power the economy.
Well, so there'll be enough to power the whole economy with time, as you're saying, based on the energy resources we have at the moment. That's good.
I think so, yes.
Okay. George, please, can I have your opinion on that as well?
Hello, Charlotte.
Hi.
Okay.
Yes, I wanted your
So
opinion.
I would like to buttress.
All right. I'm listening.
Okay, yes. I would like to add to what my colleague Ali has said, and that is it. Ghana has vast resources. All right. That is why I started from the point that for a long time we've already been talking about sustainable forms of energy. Okay, but it'll all come down to policy planning and then implementation. All right. And as Ali rightly said earlier, mostly what normally draw people back when you start talking about green and renewable energy is about cost. Because we can talk to you about the theoretical aspects, we have this amount of energy available. We can talk to you about how technically it can be feasible to harness that particular kind of energy. But at the end of the day, how much does the technology cost for us to implement these things? And that's where the challenge comes in. But that notwithstanding, Ghana is blessed to have enough supply that we can use to meet our demand that is coming when it comes to energy. And if we take action, I believe that we can get there, and then we can fuel our economy based on green and renewable energy. Yes.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. So obviously there are people who are taking on the green energy initiative in the country, and they are part of the country that are more progressing in that sector. So I'd like to ask, which part or which location or which sector or which space in Ghana would you say is taking the lead when it comes to renewable energy or green energy, and why?
Okay. I would want to understand your question more. Are you asking which sectors of the economy is adopting renewable energy at a faster rates, or in terms of installed capacity of renewable energy, which type of renewable energy has a higher uptake? Just to get your question much clearer.
It's more like two. I think both questions are both tailored in what I said. So the two questions.
Okay. Okay. I may be behind the data, but in terms of installed capacities, of course, that would depend on what you classify as renewable energy. Because if you are considering hydro in general as renewable energy, then hydro would be leading in terms of installed capacity, right? Um, but then there are, arguments as to um, what capacity, what installed capacity of hydro should be classified as renewable energy, right? Because large-scale hydropower installations are known to be associated with, unintended um, social and environmental consequences because of the impounding of the dams. That means that a wider range of settlements would have to be flooded. There would have to be resettlements and the breakdown of social structures, which kind of goes against the triple bottom line of sustainability. So, from that angle, hydro would, to some people's criteria, not be considered as renewable. Hydro out, then comes the conversation as to whether or not we are considering biomass in general as renewable, in the technical sense of renewable as energy from self-replenishing sources and not necessarily environmentally friendly energy sources, right? Then biomass would have a greater share. But of course, when you consider the emission implications, the particulate matter implications that may not conveniently put all biomass resources as renewable. We do have growing penetration of solar energy as well, right? So from all of this, you get a sense that in terms of renewable energy installations, really hydro is leading, but that of course will depend on people's criteria and what sectors of the economy is leading in terms of the installed capacity. I would say the the electricity sector, of course, is where we have higher installation of hydropower and also some growing, penetration of solar energy has been installed by the Bui Power Authority. Yes, if that answers.
Okay. George, can I have your views on these as well?
Okay, great. I'm glad Ali mentioned that the classification of renewable and then even green energy is highly contestable, because I think it's one of the major things that is still under development, as to classify what as green and then high renewable. Even at the point, they tend to distinguish between having renewable energy and then having green energy. And in some conversations, I've expressed that for most people, when you talk about green energy, it's about the energy that has close to zero impact on the environment. Whilst renewable energy, the whole idea is that the resources are available and then they can be replenished over time. To sectors that have installed high installed capacity of renewable energy or green energy in Ghana, as Ali also rightly mentioned, it will be the electricity sector, because I believe it's one of the major areas where we use for most of our needs. Okay, almost every need that we tend to look at tends to tie its belt to the electricity sector. So it's one of the places that is one of the areas that you could say has adopted the renewable energy so much. And even if I want to get it down to maybe subsectors, as in even in electricity, are we looking at commercial, industrial, or maybe household and all that? Commercially, some commercial and industrial institutions are doing fine. They are coming up gradually, but you wouldn't see so much, or you wouldn't say that there's been so much advancement in that area. And people's understanding of the forms of green and renewable energy you have in Ghana has also attracted renewable energy and green energy, especially to households, and households are also coming up. So the electricity sector has got covered when it comes to adoption. And then also, I would say households and then commercial and industrial areas are also coming up gradually in these subsectors. That is my take on this.
All right, thank you. You mentioned electricity. Now, the security of electricity generation and sustainable development is a global issue that is predominant mostly or especially in developing countries such as Ghana. Do you think green energy will be the answer to Ghana's electricity problems? Because even though the hydro, which you say is the leading, is helping empowering and for us to get electricity, there are still load shedding and fluctuations in producing or providing electricity to the people of the country, which is Ghana. So do you think if the country should adopt, I should say it's possible, um, green energy, do you think it would be the answer to Ghana's electricity problems? Do you think that will suffice or be enough to get rid of all the electricity problems that Ghana has? This time, I think I'll take the first opinion from George before we come
Okay.
to Ali.
Well, let me dive in with an example, especially when you mentioned about hydropower being one of the dominant energy sources that we have in our country. Now, when you go to a country like Nigeria, where when you take oil production in the whole world, it's one of and Nigeria is one of the top 10 countries producing oil. I mean, even in Africa, I think it's number one or so. Despite this enormous
Oh,
amount
let me
of
say it was just overthrown recently, but you can go on.
okay, good. That's why I said almost okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Now, despite this amount of oil that Nigeria has, okay, from years past, one of the major challenges in Nigeria that you have is load shedding and power cuts. So you tend to reason out and say, if we have all these resources, if we have this amount of resources, then what is the reason why we cannot even power our systems? Because when it comes to thermal systems, mostly apart from heating and all, apart from using heat from water and all that, most of the thermal systems are being powered by fossil fuels and then gases. Okay, but the reason all comes down to the point that it is not just about having the resources, but it's about tapping into the resources and making good use out of them. That is where it all comes to. And that is why it's very important that we even talk about inclusiveness. Okay, and by inclusiveness, I mean looking at private, public partnership and involving all major stakeholders who take critical part or who stand critically in our energy issues or our electricity issues. So yes, hydropower is there and we are still experiencing load shedding. And there are other forms of energy that we've adapted and we are still not meeting up. But I believe that it all comes down to tapping into what we have, how much investments go into, how much are we putting into making sure that we can get the best out of it and make every place have access to electricity. So yeah, to tapping into it, getting the technical and then the financial resources ready and then go into it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Ali, we are
Um,
waiting on your view as well.
yeah, that's fine. I think this question is quite a technical question as to whether renewable energy will be able to meet our electricity demand and not proneness to load shedding as we are experiencing today, albeit a bit reduced as compared to some years ago. Um, I think that there are general consensus on the fact that renewable energy is inherently intermittent, and because of its heavy dependence on weather variables. If you are talking solar, you are talking about solar radiations, sunlight. If you are talking wind, you are talking about wind speed, right? If you are talking geothermal, then they are specific to certain areas that you can erect these power plants. I think that technically, yes, there is a way around it. And key to this is ensuring the stability of the grid right? And how do you do this? One well-researched option is distributed generation systems, such that if there is more wind capacity, right, around the southern sector, then wind energy can supply distributed generation to those sectors. If there is more sunlight towards the northern sectors, then the power plant is sited in the northern hemisphere to harness the resources and provide the energy, the power within that sector, so that you are not transporting or transmitting electricity over a long distance that would then lead to some transmission and distribution losses, and would also prone your grid to some faults that you would have to cut off people from electricity supply. Yeah, so distributed generation systems are one option, and there are opportunities for exploring that even in Ghana. One other option that is being, I think, pushed is, first of all, to have a base load that comes from a source, right? By base load, I mean the foundational source of power that is not renewable, but from maybe a relatively cleaner source such as natural gas, right? Once that is done, you then have the flexibility within the national grid system to progressively, incorporate renewable energy, right? And hopefully, as time goes on, battery technology would be advanced enough to ensure that they are cheaper for, so that we can install bigger battery capacities that would, reduce the intermittency of renewable energy electricity supply.
All right. Now, there's a question in the comments from Nancy Kanyuki. I'm very sorry if I did not pronounce your name well, Nancy. But the question is, will it reduce our tariff if Ghana fully goes into green energy? So if Ghana fully goes into green energy, is it going to reduce energy tariffs, or is the influence is not really going to suffice? Or if it does, or when it does, do you think that it's going to reduce tariff?
Mm. Would George want to go?
Ali,
George,
I
please,
want
you
to
can
go
take.
with this one first.
Okay, that's fine. Yes, this is I can't answer this as a yes no question, because again, it depends on the type of renewable energy you are deploying at large scale, and that is also dependent on your resource, right? For instance, I am a big advocate for waste to energy, simply because we have too much waste, and um, there is a very big opportunity to explore that. Now, in the study that we did, what we found was that actually deploying waste to energy would bring the levelized cost of energy, that is, the basic cost of producing the power, would be lower than the current cost of producing power in Ghana, which means that even if you are selling at the same profit margins, the tariffs will be lower, right? So that is just one source of, of renewable energy. Several other sources of renewable energy would have different narratives to them, and so we would need to, do the cost analysis and arrive at the most economically suitable options, and their mix, in order to see what is the best way forward. But then I always, again, think that the economic conversations, though important, seem to always overshadow the driving force of this transition that we are confronted with, right? We've had several transitions, right? But then they had always be motivated? I would argue by two main things. First of all, we are looking for energy from sources that have higher energy density. For instance, when we move from agricultural residues to charcoal, we're looking for more convenient energy that is also having higher density. We then move from there to liquid fuels. Again, it was a conversation about ease of transport, right? Today's conversation is not that. The driving force is the climate. The climate seems to be lost in the economic conversation again, which I think we need to be able to bring up gradually, because otherwise we miss the point, I think.
All right, thank you. Let me read some comments in the comment section. Joy says, what is the cost of inaction? Very important question to think about. So what do you think the cost of inaction is?
According to Deloitte, the cost of inaction over the next 50 years is $178 trillion.
Oh, okay.
If you care about money, but there are other
All right.
costs. Yes.
Okay, thank you very
So
much.
to add to that, I believe the cost, as Ali has said, what that's when we bring it to quantification in terms of money. But if we are looking at even in terms of environmental aspects and then the health aspects, that is where the huge thing is. And as you mentioned rightly, it's all coming down to climate change. Now there's COP26, there's this meeting, there's a Paris Agreement and all that. And it's all because we are all trying to drive towards a sustainable environment and an environment where even though there are climate changes, okay, naturally there will be climate change, but it won't be spread by one of the major contributors, that is the burning of fossil fuels and other forms of energy that are considered to be conventional. So the costs, not just in terms of money, but also in terms of environmental impact and our health as people, is very important for us to look at.
All right, thank you. Claudia says a green powered Ghana. Yes, a green powered Ghana.
Like the
Winifred
wind.
tried to answer Joy's question by saying that she believes the cost cannot be quantified. The cost in um the cost of inaction, she believes it cannot be quantified. But then Ali gave us a quantifiable amount from Deloitte, which is 178. So there's that. Example.
About the future, it's about thinking ahead. The Industrial Revolution, when we talk about the Americans, when they started the Industrial Revolution, I mean, they went ahead with fossil fuels, they developed, and that's what some big countries will raise the argument. But how long will you continue to do the same thing if you're getting the same results and the result is not being favorable? So yeah, we are looking to a future where our energy will be very sustainable, very clean, and the generation ahead of us can also not be compromised.
All right, thank you. So Winifred tried to answer Nancy's question by saying it is all about how well we harness available resources to ensure sustainable supply of energy without compromising the access of future generations. All right. Thank you all for today. I hope we have all have our views that were shared. I hope it has all been answered. We have heard the views on green energy.
Network.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Please do also follow us on all our platforms at Abeyie Innovation Studios and join us for the next episode of Focus on Interact. Thank you very much for coming, George and Ali. Thank you for taking time off your busy schedule to join us in this discussion on green energy. We hope you come back again to share more views on these. Thank you to everyone who also logged in to listen to this. I am Charlotte Mensah, and see you on the next episode of Focus and Interact. Enjoy the rest